Okay, is this? Ooh, we're gonna try to get to this one. But is this a pro-immigration or anti-immigration cartoon? That's not even a good question. I'll be honest with you. The better question is: was the message of the person who drew this Joseph Kepler? He did some satire. Do you know what satire is? Have you gone through that yet? And oh, you got to go through satire, right? I'm not going to explain it to you now. I'll just let your English teacher do that. I have another question for your English teacher in a few minutes too. When the guy that was drawing this, Joseph Kepler, when he drew it, was he thinking in his mind, I agree with this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy in their anti-immigrant, like, stay out, dude message? If that's not his message, if his message is, I don't agree with these people, then what was his message? Yeah, Mo?
He was pro-immigration because the cartoon is showing how these people that are anti are very political.
Hypocrite. That's the word I'm looking for. His message is that these guys are hypocrites. They're hypocrites because they used to be him. They used to be like him. And remember that tagline, the title is Looking Backward, Looking Backward. They would close to the newcomer, the bridge that brought them and their fathers over. Them and their fathers over. That's hypocritical, right? They had the chance. They came over just like him. They were just as poor as he was. I mean, look at these guys, right? They're all shabby and everything. They had the same chances, and they worked their way up, and they became wealthy. And isn't that the American dream? Right? So who are they to tell this guy he can't come over? Because he's the exact same. I mean, maybe there is, well, we're the first wave of immigrants, and he's a new wave of immigrant, and he's from Greece, and we don't like him because he's from Greece. Okay, I get it, whatever. But it's still, there's some hypocrisy there, right? And if you can't tell, I personally am very much pro-immigration. Now, we can have a long discussion about whether or not it's documented or undocumented, illegal, and all that kind of stuff, right? But in my experience, I've found that a lot of immigrants, most immigrants, are have a great work ethic. They're trying to escape something where they came from in order to make where they are and make where they are better. So that's my opinion. You can take it or leave it. Now, I want to go over with you. You have in front of you a video sheet. If you are at home and watching this, just answer the questions on here, and that'll be fine. On your video sheet, just answer these questions. Now, I want to go over a couple of procedural things first. Number 4, you should know what an anarchist is by now. What is an anarchist? What do they believe? What do they not want? Yeah. They don't want government. They want to get rid of government. Every type of level of government. You'll see as you're watching this, those are some of the people that would be turned away when they came over. Anti-Semitic. Does anybody know what that means? Yeah. Against Jewish people. You're going to see that there's a person against anti-Jewish people. She was for Jewish immigration. You'll see that. Michael, did I not give you a sheet of paper?
No.
It's right. If you don't mind getting it, it's right in front of you on that cabinet. Ellis Island. Does anybody know anything about Ellis Island? Yeah, Emma.
Was it Ellis Island where all of the immigrants were kept in and stuff?
From 1900 on, you can put down for number 3, Ellis Island, Immigration Processing Center. Over a little bit more, over the other cabinet. There you go. Immigration Processing Center. Now, you'll find out who Emma Lazarus was in just a minute. Here is thought question number 1 real quick.
Help everyone explore new worlds and ideas. Support your PBS station.
PBS propaganda. Okay. Number 1 thought question.
remember one time after the war, I was about 12. My father had a job in a factory across the way. And because he had lost his leg, he had a stump and a wooden artificial leg. And in the summer, and there's nothing quite as ferocious as a New York August, he would work on this assembly line 8 hours a day, and he was home at night, and I heard him weeping in the dark around 1 o'clock in the morning. And I knew that no matter what I ever did, I couldn't articulate it exactly, that I had to honor that pain, that you must honor that. And I think that's what the children of immigrants do, all of us. We know what they gave up. They gave up their countries. In some cases, they gave up their languages. They worked at the lousiest, rottenest jobs in order to put food on our tables. We have to honor that for the rest of our lives.
I'm going to pause it for a second, and I want you to think about that question. Some of you are like, well, yeah, that's a no-brainer, right? Like, I believe that we should honor the sacrifices that immigrants make when they come over here because they give up everything. If you want to focus on it being, documented and not on the undocumented, fine, whatever. But answer that as you actually feel. Like, this will kind of give me an idea of, what your stance on immigration is. And no judgment either way. But do you agree with him that all of us, being the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, whatever, of immigrants, that we should honor the things that they did for us? Or do you have a different spin on this? Just give me an explanation there, please.
In early December 1883, a 34-year-old German Jewish poet named Emma Lazarus, appalled by the recent upsurge of anti-Semitic violence in Russia, submitted a 14-line poem to help the faltering fundraising campaign for the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. The liberty her sonnet celebrated had nothing to do with the abstract political ideals the French had intended. It was liberty as a beacon of hope, shining out to oppressed peoples around the world. It was the future, reaching out to the present, to unchain humanity from the shackles of the past.
The promise of New York to anybody who comes here is the promise of Emma Lazarus, of the Statue of Liberty. And there was a reason that that poem, which structurally and in terms of the words used, could be thought to be very sentimental. Certainly it is. And then it contains something. The test of that poem is that it is true. And these huddled masses yearning to be free did come here, and we did make them free. In fact, no matter who you are, at some point in your life, hearing those words or reading those words, just thinking of those words, your eyes will fill with tears. And what makes you tearful is that truth.
Give me your tide, your poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. I'll never forget those words.
Emma Lazarus herself never saw the statue her poem so movingly commemorated, or the epic human tide it foretold. Traveling in Europe during the final months of the statue's construction, she was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. Passing through the harbor on her way home in the summer of 1887, she was too ill and weak even to come on deck. She died in her home in Manhattan 3 months later, at the age of 38. More than 15 years later, on May 6, 1903, a bronze plaque inscribed with her stirring words was finally affixed to the base of the statue. It would take decades more for Americans to realize the full meaning of the gift the French had given them.
If you want, they're going to now read the poem for you. If you want to follow along with the actual words, it's on the back of your sheet. If you just want to look at the images, that's fine too, because they actually show some of the people that the poem is, kind of talking about.
Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that Twin Cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my light beside the golden door.
All right, I'm going to channel my inner English teacher here, and I'm going to do a much worse job at analyzing poetry than your English teachers do, but that's just the way it goes, right? Who's your English teacher? Is it Mr. Wastier, Mrs. Stoltz, Mrs. Johnson? So they all do better than me, but I am going to ask you some questions here. So number one, first, what do you have down for Emma Lazarus? What should we know? If we don't know anything else about her, there's this one thing that she did in history that is well known, and it is she wrote the poem, and actually, not just inspired, but it's affixed at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty. Right? Has anybody ever been to Liberty Island? You went past it. I did too. I never got to go on it, and I wish I would have, because we were actually going to Ellis Island. Oh. Rip. Right. Hopefully you can go. Hopefully I can go back someday. You can go back, and hopefully all of you can, go see it someday. Anyway, let's flip on the back and let's look at this poem, if you would, please. The poem's name is New Colossus. What is a colossus? Guess? Yeah. Something really big, right? It doesn't have to be a statue. It can just be huge. It could be a man or a woman. It could be a statue. It could be a building. Anything that's like huge, as President Trump would say. Huge. Okay. That's how we. Okay. Anyway, New Colossus implies that there was an old one, right? So what was the old Colossus? Does anybody know what that picture of the old Colossus is? No? Nobody? Nobody at all? Nobody? It's an island near Greece. It's off the coast of Asia Minor, but it was a Greek area. It was a wonder of the ancient world. It was called the Colossus of Rhodes. The Colossus of Rhodes was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And as you can see there, this is an artist's rendition. It was absolutely enormous. It was for the island of Rhodes. And it was basically a message to everyone out there. There's no way that you can come and attack us and beat us. Because look at the huge, enormous things that we are able to build. If we can build something like that, then what makes you think that you can come here and invade us and win? You can't. So just go away. It was not a welcoming sight. It was supposed to be an intimidating, threatening sight. Okay? So here she starts the poem, saying, not like the bronze giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. We are the opposite of that. In other words, the new Colossus is what? Welcoming, right? And she says that like over and over again. Listen, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning. I think, I could be wrong, but I think that's just a fancy way of saying she's got a big old torch that has a big bright light on it. And big bright lights on big torches are like a welcome, like a lighthouse. It's a guide in, right? And her name is Mother of Exiles. What is an exile? Yeah. Somebody got kicked out, not wanted. She's the mother of these people, bringing them in. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Now, this is the part that takes a little bit of explaining to do. Does anybody think they have any idea what this means, the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame? Anybody? Nobody? Okay. Where is the Statue of Liberty placed? Near what city? New York City, right? Does that give you a clue as far as twin cities and air-bridged harbor and lights that won't turn off? Caden, can you try to push that button over there and see if it works? If you don't, that's fine. Yay, I get to draw something. Okay, here's the Hudson River. I'm going to put HR for Hudson River. Thank you. And we'll put there's a little like stream current, right? Okay, Hudson River goes to upstate New York, right? It goes right past what we call Manhattan Island. Just kind of draw that. That's Manhattan Island, or what we would call New York City today, right? This whole thing is New York City. Now, and how it goes is that this out here is the harbor to the Atlantic Ocean. So this is from the Atlantic, Ocean. Okay. This is called Long Island. Do you know why it's called Long Island? It's a long darn island. It's like over 100 miles long, right? So this is New York City. This neighborhood right here is the same neighborhood where Steve Rogers grew up, Captain America. Brooklyn, thank you. I'm just going to put B here for Brooklyn. And this is just like trivia, since we're talking about Marvel. This neighborhood is where Spider-Man grew up. Hey, there's got Marvel fans in here, right? The Bronx is up in here. Staten Island is like down in here. And so those are now the 5 boroughs of New York. Back then, when this was Britain, these were all different cities. The Twin Cities is Brooklyn and New York. Okay, got that so far? The Twin Cities is Brooklyn and New York. So when it says air-bridged harbor, what does that mean? Air-bridged. What's that bridge called? Yeah? We've already seen it. Well, we've seen it begun anyway in a video. The Brooklyn Bridge. Okay. Now, this is an air-bridged harbor. By the way, this is the East River because it's on the east side of New York City. Okay, so what does that mean, air-bridged? Whenever you see a bridge, doesn't it usually look like this? Here's the water that the bridge is going over, and here's the bridge. And like to get to it, you have to go like this. And then the bridge has like all these supports underneath, right? Don't you love this art? That's what you usually see, right? That's not air bridge. That's like stuff supporting it bridge, right? The Brooklyn Bridge, though, remember those massive structures on either side of the river that they were building, and the Panic of 1873 was keeping it from being constructed? Well, they finished it. Air-bridged? Yeah. There you go. That's the exact word to use. It's a suspension bridge. See all this? This is miles and miles and hundreds of miles of wire, steel rope It's air bridge. There's nothing under here. Boats can pass through real easy. Boats cannot pass under this very easy, right? It was the first suspension bridge, I think, in world history, at least in America. Okay, and you can do that because steel is a stronger metal that helps support all that weight. And still today, the Brooklyn Bridge is like this. And every other bridge that's been gone across here since, right, is a suspension bridge. So she is looking at, her eyes command the air-bridged harbor that Twin Cities frame. She's talking about Brooklyn and New York and the Brooklyn Bridge with its suspension. Okay, got it? Got it? Okay. And here's what she says. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp. What is pomp? Keep all your fancy, wealthy, rich, elite people and all the things that they do and they own. You keep that over there. That you keep that Europe. That is your stuff. That's you. That's not us. Cries she with silent lips. Instead, who is she asking to be sent over? The exiles. Right? Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse. What is refuse? What is refuse? I'm not pointing at Michael or Katie. What is refuse? What? More accurately, that's trash. That refuse is trash. Right? And yes, you want them to get out, right? That's what Europe is saying. Get out. We don't want you. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless tempest tossed to me. Wow. Send us the worst you got. Don't send us that old, kings and queens and lords and ladies and all that kind of stuff. We don't want that crap. We want your outcasts. And we'll make something of them. And we'll give them a chance to become, those rich guys that you saw there. That is a pro-immigration or an anti-immigration cartoon or a poem. Definitely pro-immigration poem, right? Okay, let's keep going.
And Lazarus.
Ask your English teachers if that's a sonnet, please. Will you please ask them if that's a sonnet? It has 14 lines like a sonnet does, but I'm not sure if it has the structure that a sonnet does. Please ask your English teacher if that's a sonnet.
At 2 o'clock on the afternoon of May 11, 1896, a photographer named William Hayes hoisted a strange-looking camera up onto a tripod at the southern end of Herald Square. Passers-by assumed he was about to expose a glass plate negative.
Number 2 thought
But
question.
the cumbersome apparatus, the latest invention of Hayes' employer, Thomas Alva Edison, did not take still pictures. Instead, exposing one frame after another, each just an instant apart from the next, 16 times a second, it was capable of capturing for the first time the speed and vitality of urban life.
Speed and vitality of urban life.
People were terrified. When they first saw these images, they had no idea what they were. They had just brief 15, 30-second shots of things, but they hand-tinted some of them to be colored. They did have this one film of a wall of water just rushing at you, and people got up in a panic and stormed out of the theater. I mean, just charged out of the theater because they thought that, the wall was broken down and there was some kind of tidal wave coming through the wall.
Mesmerized by the kinetic energy of New York, the first cameramen carried their equipment everywhere, shooting short films they called actualities. Real-life views of actual places and events. Most had no plots and no characters, and most lasted only a minute or two. But audiences everywhere flocked to see them, enthralled by the spectacle of the city itself, which by 1900 had become the greatest show on earth.
These early movies, by the way, whose invention was this motion picture camera? Thomas Edison. These early movies showed everyday life. And don't we really do the same thing today, kind of, right? Like we have movie makers right here in our hands, right? And what do? Do we make movies that are like awesome plots and like big explosions and so on and so forth? Or do we take these things and like take a snap of like this part of our head and send it to somebody to keep our snap streak up, right? Like we watch little TikTok videos of people doing like silly things in real life. We don't like make great cinema with our social media apps, right? We want to see everyday life. I mean, I could be wrong with some of you, but I think most of us are kind of the same, right? We use Facebook and Instagram, and you don't use Facebook, right? But Instagram and all those kind of things to just show like our everyday kind of life, our food, and that's just what people like. They liked everyday life.
What the cameras revealed was a city that now had the world's busiest harbor, the world's biggest ships and longest bridges, the worst slums and grandest mansions. It had a statue 15 stories tall and a park 840 acres in size. It had trains that ran 100 feet above the ground and leapt across rivers. Though the film sometimes captured grand civic ceremonies and great public events, the most effective were those of daily life. Entranced, as Walt Whitman had been, by the humblest and most ordinary of modes. A truck moving down the street. A windy day. A woman's smile. The new motion pictures conveyed, as nothing else had, the mystery and beauty and democratic glory of the modern world.
Motion pictures come into play, and they record the city, and they record it in such a way that make it even seem more exciting than it was.
This guy starts to not make sense, so I'm gonna.
Itself.
It's lagging a little bit.
An even greater transformation was underway. Between 1898 and 1913, the human and physical and political landscape of the city would be transformed beyond recognition. During that time, the entire world would arrive on the city's doorstep, and most of those who came would be changed utterly by what they found there. But in the end, nothing would be more moving or prove to have more lasting consequences for the city and the nation than the changes the newcomers themselves would bring to the life of New York City. In little more than a decade, the 20th century itself would be born on the streets of New York, and nothing would ever be the same again.
Well, I think one of the great things about New York is it's not a static thing. It's not New York is. New York is always becoming. It's becoming physically as buildings are torn down and changed much more so than any other American city. But it's also always becoming in terms of what it is in something we can't see, in the culture of the city. So the immigrants came to New York City, especially in these large numbers between the 1880s and 1920s, and made it their own. Made it a kind of place that the world had never seen before. Made it where there were more Italians than in New York than there were in Naples, more Irish than in Dublin, more Greeks than in Athens. And it was an incredible experience because the city was so vast. So many of these immigrants were there that the city was open to these changes. So that even today, what is New York? It's more than a mosaic. It's a new kind of city.
If you were living in New York in those years at the turn of the century, you knew it was happening right there in front of you, in your village. And of course, it disturbed many people. They didn't like it. They thought it was going to ruin the country, and they were wrong.
It began in the 1880s, spurred on by poverty and persecution, by financial panic and political upheaval, by family strife and personal woe.
Okay, that is number 3 thought question. I'm going to go back over it again. Here's something new. Pull factors are what pull you to the new country you're moving to. That's a job, for example. The jobs in America were pull factors. What I'm asking you to write down here are push factors. What are pushing them out of their old country? I want you to get 2 of these. They're going to say them really fast, so just try to get 2. 2 things that were pushing them out of their old country.
They didn't like it. They thought it was going to ruin the country, and they were wrong.
It began in the 1880s, spurred on by poverty and persecution, by financial panic and political upheaval, by family strife and personal woe. They came not from Northern Europe this time, but from the East and from the South. Italians, Jews, Greeks, and Poles, Russians, Hungarians, Ukrainians, Armenians, and Turks. Out of the remote and little-known reaches of Europe, one awestruck observer wrote, marches a vast and endless army.
It was a huge human tide, and coming on all the time, year after year, and growing. In 1907, 1,200,000 people, 1,200,000 people came into the city of New York, from Europe primarily. There were 289,000 of them from Italy alone, 256,000 from Russia, just in 1 year. And in the long run, they gave us more than they got.
One way or the other, they had all heard the same thing. There was freedom and opportunity in America for anyone willing to work. And the place with the most jobs was the sprawling, unfathomably large seaport of New York. For most, it meant leaving everything familiar behind.
The day I left home, my mother came with me to the railroad station. When we said goodbye, she said it was like seeing me going to my casket. I never saw her again. Julia Prof, 1899.
There was a sense that the city, a message that the city whispered to its people and to people from all over the United States. You know, come here, everything is possible. Now, that's a seductive sound, it's a seductive whisper. A lot of people failed at it, but at least the promise was there.
There's always been a fitting promise, Neil. And the promise is there because it is the entrance city. It's the beginning. But I still think of it as a city to which, as James Joyce said about his characters, here comes everybody.
About 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, we all got up. The whole boat bent toward her because everybody went out. Everybody. She was beautiful, with the sunshine so bright and so big.
Who is she?
And everybody was crying.
Is that who you're looking at? Thank you.
The captain came and said, "Please, everybody, we should move a little bit to the center." But nobody would move.
The thrill was unbelievable, but always the fear, because you have to go to Ellis Island. I heard all kinds of things that they will tell you on the boat. My God, I said, I hope they're not going to send me back. Joseph Deleuze.
For decades, immigrants to New York had come through Castle Garden, a ramshackle state-run depot at the foot of Manhattan. But by 1890, the one-time concert hall had been completely overwhelmed by the tidal wave of new immigrants. And work had begun on a massive new federal installation, far out in the harbor, on an abandoned ammunition dump called Ellis Island. On December 17, 1900, the massive complex of brick, stone, and steel was finally complete. Built to accommodate 500,000 people a year, it was soon handling twice that number, sometimes as many as 12,000 a day. In 30 years, 12 million people would stream through the great echoing registry room, hoping to find sanctuary and a new beginning in America. More than 4 million of them would settle permanently in New York, tripling its population in less than a single lifetime.
Immigration made us huge. You could never have bred to yourself. It arrived here.
Okay, now this 5 and 6 they kind of go together. I probably should have made them one question. I'm actually going to shout out things to help you with number 6, and then we can go back and do number 5. There's a process when these immigrants get off the boat going through Ellis Island. And I'm just going to shout out number 1, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So actually, number 1, the first step is getting off the boat at the dock.
On disembarking, the pilgrims entered a vast, bewildering, impersonal machine, an assembly line for processing immigrants. With numbered tags pinned to their clothes, they were swiftly herded into long lines, then ushered inside the main building by harried immigration officials.
Number 2, long lines.
In dozens of different tongues. Inspectors were required
Number 3, inspections.
To turn back polygamists, paupers, criminals, and the mentally ill, as well as anyone with a heart condition, or a physical disability, or a contagious disease. The inspections were brusque, irreversible, and carried out with astonishing speed. On the busiest days, the examiners had less than 6 seconds to detect any one of 60 conditions. The unlucky ones were swiftly removed from the line without explanation and sent to special examination rooms with chalk letters hastily scrawled on their coats. L for lateness, C for conjunctivitis, H for heart problems, X for suspected insanity.
X for what? X, 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 X. They put them all in the same room.
The examination for trachoma, an incurable disease of the eye, was particularly traumatic. Anyone infected was sent back. 25-year-old Fiorello LaGuardia, working as an interpreter on Ellis Island to pay his way through law school, never forgot the harrowing scenes that ensued.
Sometimes, if it was a young child who suffered from trachoma, one of the parents had to return to the native country with a rejected member of the family. When they learned their fate, they were stunned. They had never felt ill. They had never heard
Well, that was
the word trachoma. They could see all right, and they had no homes to return to. Fiorello LaGuardia.
LaGuardia Airport's named after him. He was a mayor.
For the majority who passed the medical exam, the last hurdle was the registry room.
Number 4, registry
where the
room.
final interrogation was held. The nearest earthly likeness, one man said, to the final day of judgment. In rapid succession,
Please keep those. We'll finish tomorrow.
His or her name, place of birth,
Then you'll give it to me for points.
destination, and occupation. How much money he or she had. Whether he or she had ever been in jail, or had ever been an anarchist. No immigrant's name was ever known to have been changed by the inspectors at Ellis Island, who merely confirmed information already before them in the ship's manifest. For 80% of the newcomers, the harrowing experience was over in 4 or 5 hours. And in the end, fewer than 1 in 50 were denied entrance to America. Without ceremony or congratulation, the new arrivals were curtly waved down a flight of stairs toward the exit, where, at a place called the Kissing Post, after separations that had sometimes lasted months or years, they were finally met by family and friends.
The Italian kisses his little children, but scarcely speaks to his wife. The Hungarian and Slavish people put their arms around one another and weep. The Jew of all countries kisses his wife and children as though he had all the kisses in the world and intended to use them all up quick.
immigrants quickly dispersed to distant towns and cities around the country. But for 1 in 4 of the new arrivals, the final destination was a 15-minute ferry ride away, on an island many of them would never leave again. On board the ferry, approaching the battery, they stood in wonder at the last and most extraordinary sight of all. An astonishing vision that seemed to corroborate everything they hoped the new world might be.
Everybody was looking at Manhattan, and I must admit, that sight I don't think I will ever forget.
I thought I was in heaven. My God. Was this a city on earth? Or a city in heaven?